true transformation often begins in the most unexpected moments, when our hearts are tugged in directions that feel unsettling, and our minds are overwhelmed by questions we cannot easily answer. It is in those precise moments of vulnerability that we stumble upon an invitation to surrender our tightly held expectations and illusions of control. Imagine standing at the edge of a familiar comfort zone, peering into a vast unknown that beckons you forward with a gentle insistence. That edge can be terrifying, but it can also be exhilarating. Deep within you, there is a sense that relinquishing what you think defines you might lead to a more authentic understanding of who you actually are. The moment you decide to trust that faint yet persistent voice calling you to something greater is the moment the transformative power of sacrifice begins to unfold. Sacrifice is so much more than an obligation or a burdensome requirement. When we speak of giving up something to draw nearer to God, we are touching upon a fundamental principle of spiritual growth that transcends rule-following or mechanical religious duty. The word sacrifice often invokes images of loss, pain, or surrender that is forced upon us. Yet in a deeper sense, sacrifice can be an invitation to shed layers of superficial desires, to relinquish false securities, and to cultivate a closer, more intimate relationship with the divine. It is not purely about losing something. Rather, it is about gaining something infinitely more precious than what you release. In an age filled with quick fixes and instant gratification, the very notion of sacrifice can seem archaic. We live in a world where constant stimulation and convenience reign supreme. Many voices urge us to accumulate more, to chase possessions and experiences in hopes of achieving fulfillment. But there is a quieter whisper that exists beneath the noise of worldly ambition. This whisper calls us to reconsider the nature of true joy and to explore what it means to surrender our will, or aspects of it, to a higher purpose. The irony is that when we intentionally give up certain comforts or habits that keep us from true spiritual awareness, we actually uncover a richness and depth that surpasses fleeting satisfaction. This journey of giving up to grow closer to God is not about punishing ourselves or denying the goodness of life's pleasures. Rather, it is an invitation to open our eyes and hearts to the deeper joys that lie beyond those surface-level distractions. By stepping away from the constant pursuit of temporary fulfillments, we carve out space for a profound connection with the divine source of life. When we let go, we are not left empty. We find ourselves filled with a peace and clarity that are lasting, a deeper knowledge of our purpose, and a sense of being personally guided. Everything you have sought in the external world, approval, security, meaning, can be found in a more enduring form through letting go. It is an act of trust, a movement of faith that tells the universe you are willing to place your hope in something greater than your limited perspective. And each sacrifice, however small or great, strengthens that trust, draws you closer to God, and reveals new facets of a love that is both boundless and personal. In the pages that follow, we will embark on a journey through the dimensions of authentic sacrifice. We will explore the misconceptions that often lead people to resist the idea of letting go. We will delve into how true surrender connects us more intimately to God. And we will ultimately discover that what appears to be the highest cost can actually become the most extraordinary gift. We live in a culture that often glorifies personal independence and self-reliance. This mindset can be beneficial in areas like career advancement or creative innovation, but it can also create a barrier when we approach the concept of spiritual growth. Sacrifice or surrender might appear as weakness to those who place unyielding faith in personal willpower. Yet in the spiritual realm, genuine surrender can be the most powerful act of strength. When you deliberately relinquish something that has become a hindrance or an idol, you are affirming a deeper allegiance. You are proclaiming that your purpose extends beyond personal gain, and that there is a divine wisdom worth trusting above all else. This does not come without conflict. Within each of us, there is a very human desire to avoid discomfort and to stay within the boundaries of what we already know. Our routines and attachments can become security blankets that promise us familiarity and reassurance. Even if they no longer serve our highest good, we cling to them because they represent a source of predictability. That is why the decision to sacrifice requires a certain courage. It involves stepping outside the safe contours of the known. Whether the sacrifice is giving up an unhealthy relationship, a negative habit, or even a cherished dream that pulls us away from our spiritual path, the process is rarely easy. Yet it is within that difficult process that we often find our faith tested, refined, and ultimately strengthened. When we speak of giving something up to draw closer to God, it does not always mean relinquishing tangible possessions. Sometimes it is an interior act, such as letting go of resentment, pride, or a deep-seated fear. Letting go of a stubborn grudge or a long-held bitterness can feel like a true sacrifice, because we have become accustomed to carrying that weight. It might even give us a distorted sense of power or justification. But once we release these inner burdens, we experience a freedom that cannot be matched by any external source. In that freedom, there is newfound space for divine love to flow in. The emptiness left by bitterness transforms into a capacity for deeper compassion. The vacuum created by pride opens a path for humility, and with humility comes the ability to see God's hand more clearly in our lives. One of the greatest misconceptions about sacrifice is that it is primarily about suffering or deprivation. However, in many spiritual traditions, sacrifice is viewed as a profound act of devotion or worship. In the Judeo-Christian heritage, for instance, the notion of sacrifice transformed from the offering of animals to the offering of one's heart, mind, and soul to God. Jesus spoke about denying oneself and taking up a cross, language that can be alarming at face value. But beneath the stark words, there is a powerful lesson about turning away from the distractions that keep us from God and embracing the life that God has intended for us. Indeed, the pathway of sacrifice is not a road to misery, but a road to wholeness and joy. When we say no to certain temptations or illusions, we create a space for a divine yes that can fill us with life. Imagine what happens when you declutter a room, clearing away objects that no longer have purpose or that weigh you down with unnecessary baggage. The newly opened area feels spacious, inviting, and full of possibilities. In the same way, when you let go of inner or outer clutter, your life becomes more spacious for God's presence. That presence can fill you with clarity and wisdom, guiding you to make choices that are more aligned with your true spiritual identity. Yet giving up something is not an end in itself. If you fixate on the act of sacrificing, you might begin to measure your worth by how much you have lost, rather than how much you have grown. The focus should always remain on the growth, the purpose behind the action, and the relationship with God that flourishes through each act of surrender. You are not performing a spiritual transaction in which you lose one thing in exchange for another. Rather, you are stepping into a process of transformation. This process is dynamic, ever-evolving, and intimately connected to your willingness to trust in a higher plan. Trust is indeed a critical component of sacrifice. Without trust, the act of giving up can feel hollow or even manipulative, as though we are merely trying to curry favor with the divine. With trust, however, sacrifice becomes a powerful act of love and obedience. It says, "I believe God's plan for me is greater than the one I can create on my own. I believe that by relinquishing what binds me, I will discover the freedom and love that my heart truly longs for." It is not blind faith, but rather a faith rooted in the lived experiences of individuals throughout history who have found that genuine sacrifice yields spiritual richness. For many people, the idea of giving something up might initially feel like an imposition, a rule set forth by religious institutions. But look deeper, and you will find that true sacrifice flows from the heart rather than from external compulsion. Consider a person who decides to fast for a spiritual reason. If they do it merely out of obligation, counting the hours and complaining internally, their fast might become an exercise in frustration. On the other hand, if they fast as a heartfelt act of devotion, redirecting their physical hunger to remind themselves of their spiritual hunger for God, then the fast transforms into a moment of grace. The physical discipline becomes a pathway to spiritual insight, and the temporary discomfort points toward a deeper longing for divine sustenance. In our modern landscape, it might seem challenging to practice traditional forms of sacrifice, especially when faced with relentless demands from work, family, and society. But sacrifice does not have to be grand or dramatic to be meaningful. Small acts of surrender, like setting aside daily time for prayer instead of scrolling through social media or choosing silence over gossip, can accumulate into significant spiritual momentum. Each small decision to let go of a distraction or temptation is like adding a brick to a foundation that steadily shapes a life oriented toward God. This life is then marked by deeper connection, greater compassion, and a serenity that others can sense. Ultimately, the heart of sacrifice is love. When we surrender our attachments or illusions, we do so because we love and trust God more than we love the transient things of this world. Love transforms sacrifice from a mere duty into a joyful offering. Think of a parent who sacrifices personal time and comfort to care for a child. In most cases, that parent does not feel resentful. Instead, the parent experiences a deeper bond, a sense of fulfillment in watching the child flourish. Something similar happens in our relationship with the divine. When our sacrifices arise from love, the burden becomes light, and the reward is not just personal growth, but an intimacy with God that cannot be replicated by any earthly pursuit. Another dimension of this topic involves understanding what we might call divine economy. Often we cling to things because we fear lack or worry that letting go of something will leave us empty. Yet if we believe in a God who provides, who is an endless source of all that is good, then our act of giving up can be met with an outpouring of grace we never expected. This does not mean that we treat God like a vending machine, hoping that if we input enough tokens of sacrifice, we will receive blessings on demand. Rather, it points to the mysterious way God's love operates. When you give without calculating what you get in return, when you trust God more than your own limited resources, you often find that you are met with abundance in ways you did not anticipate. Spiritual history is rich with stories of individuals who chose to sacrifice comfort, wealth, or prestige for the sake of growing closer to God. Far from leading lives of grim deprivation, many of these individuals found joy and purpose that outshone anything they had known previously. In these stories, the real sacrifice is letting go of one's own agenda and ego-driven desires to become more receptive to divine grace. This grace is not always quantifiable in human terms, but it provides a sustaining power that enables you to face challenges with courage and to love others with an open heart. When we discover this reality, we start to see that sacrifice is not just an isolated act, but a lifestyle guided by divine wisdom. Each day becomes an opportunity to identify the subtle or overt ways we can let go of what hinders our spiritual progress. Perhaps it is the need to always be right in an argument, which you sacrifice for the sake of peace and understanding. Perhaps it is the habit of worrying about the future, which you sacrifice for a renewed commitment to trusting in God's provision. Or perhaps it is a major life choice like changing careers or moving to a place that allows you to serve others more wholeheartedly. In each scenario, the essence of the sacrifice remains the same: letting go of something for the sake of a closer walk with God. As you progress on this path, you may find that sacrifices that once seemed daunting grow easier with practice. This does not mean you become indifferent or lose your sense of desire. Rather, you develop a deeper awareness of which desires are leading you closer to God and which ones are pulling you away. You learn to prioritize your spiritual well-being over fleeting pleasures. Over time, you also discover that in giving up certain attachments, you gain new insights, relationships, and experiences that are far more nourishing than what you left behind. Through it all, prayer and reflection are essential. Often we do not immediately see the fruits of our sacrifices. We might even question whether they were worthwhile. This is where a consistent spiritual practice can help us remain centered and attuned to the gentle leading of God. In prayer, we can present our uncertainties, our hopes, and our fears. We can ask for guidance about what needs to be surrendered and the courage to follow through. We can also ask for humility to accept God's will, even when it diverges from our plans. This ongoing dialogue deepens our relationship with the divine and helps us stay mindful of the bigger picture. Many people find that the act of sacrifice is intimately tied to the concept of transformation. Letting go of something in our lives can symbolize an inner shift in our identity. We move from being primarily self-focused to being God-focused. Sometimes, the notion of sacrifice might clash with modern desires for self-realization and expression. Yet in many ways, true self-realization is incomplete without understanding the value of surrender. We can accomplish many external feats, gather accolades, and still feel a profound emptiness if our deeper thirst for God remains unquenched. Sacrifice addresses that thirst directly. It liberates us from the illusions that anything but God can fulfill our ultimate longing. In that liberation, our authentic self emerges, freed from the clutter of superficial desires. Another potent dimension to consider is how personal sacrifice enriches our relationships with others. When we give up self-centered behaviors or toxic patterns, we become more empathetic and present for those we love. We find that as we draw closer to God, we simultaneously develop a deeper sense of compassion, patience, and generosity. Our willingness to let go of pride or resentment can mend broken relationships. Our choice to sacrifice personal comfort can lead us to serve others more fully, mirroring the sacrificial love we believe God extends to us. In a broader sense, a life marked by sacrifice can become a powerful testimony. People often notice a certain peace or radiance in individuals who have embraced a lifestyle of surrender. This radiance is not about perfection, but about alignment with a divine source of love. It can spark curiosity and admiration in those who witness it. Indeed, many have been inspired to explore spiritual truths simply by observing how another person's sacrifices seem to yield deeper fulfillment rather than bitterness. In that way, one person's journey of letting go can open the door for many to discover the treasure of divine connection for themselves. Though this path is profoundly personal, it does not have to be lonely. Communities of faith or spiritual companions can provide much-needed encouragement, prayer support, and accountability. In gathering with others who share the same desire for closeness to God, we may find the strength to persevere in moments of doubt. The knowledge that someone else understands our struggles and lifts us up in prayer can make the difference between giving in to discouragement and holding fast to trust. Moreover, in witnessing the sacrifices of others, we see a living example of how God can work through hearts that are willing to yield to divine direction. In the grand sweep of spirituality, sacrifice is a golden thread that ties together different traditions and eras. It points to a universal longing to connect with something greater than ourselves, to transcend self-centeredness, and to discover lasting meaning. While the specifics of what we give up might vary from culture to culture or person to person, the essence remains the same: turning away from lesser attachments to embrace a higher calling. Whether you are new to this idea or have walked this road many times, there is always more to learn and deeper levels of trust to explore. Ultimately, the question each of us faces is not whether we will sacrifice, but what we will sacrifice for. We will inevitably give our time, energy, and resources to something. The invitation here is to consider directing those sacrifices toward the one who created and sustains us, trusting that what might feel like a loss is actually an opening to indescribable gain. The aim is not to achieve a pinnacle of religious virtue. The aim is to experience a powerful, ongoing transformation that brings us closer to the heart of God. Everything in life carries a cost, whether it is in the currency of time, energy, or devotion. Sacrifice in the context of growing closer to God is not about living in a perpetual state of want or suffering. Instead, it invites us to exchange lesser pursuits for something of infinitely greater worth. It is an invitation to release our grip on distractions, resentments, fears, and even cherished ambitions, so that we may open our hands and hearts to the abundant love God longs to pour into us. When we see sacrifice through this lens, it becomes a profound source of liberation rather than an obligation. It is like stepping out of a cramped, darkened room into a wide open field bathed in light. Where once we might have felt confined by our attachments, we now discover boundless space for God's grace to work in and through us. That grace does not render our daily struggles or responsibilities irrelevant. Rather, it infuses them with new purpose. We begin to see every aspect of life as an opportunity to align ourselves more closely with the divine will, trusting that each moment of surrender draws us deeper into the mystery of God's love. The paradox is unmistakable. By giving up, we gain. By losing something, we find something more precious than words can convey. By setting aside our limited agendas, we align ourselves with a higher plan that knows our needs more intimately than we ever could. This is not merely a lofty spiritual idea. It is a lived reality for those who have embraced the call to surrender and discovered firsthand the peace, joy, and transformative power it brings. When you decide to walk this path, you are not resigning yourself to emptiness. You are, in fact, opening yourself to a fullness of life and love that transcends every boundary of the ordinary. In the end, giving up to grow closer to God reshapes not only our spiritual perspective, but our entire existence. Our priorities shift from self-centered desires to the pursuit of deeper communion with the divine. Our hearts become attuned to a grace that gently dissolves fear, pride, and bitterness, replacing them with trust, humility, and compassion. No matter where you are on your spiritual journey, the invitation to sacrifice remains ever present, a hopeful summons to shed the unnecessary weight you carry and embrace a freedom that is found only in surrender. The true meaning of sacrifice, far from being an archaic notion, stands as a timeless truth that can illuminate the path to genuine transformation and enduring closeness with the God who loves us beyond measure.